My neighbor called the cops on me because I was exposing myself inside my house, but she was bawling her eyes when I charged her with trespassing and cops escorted her out. A couple of weeks ago, I pulled into my driveway and was greeted by a woman waiting for me. She claimed she was there out of concern for the neighborhood children. According to her, she and her kids had seen me through my windows dressed inappropriately while they were hiking. I told her that wasn't possible because the only way anyone could see into my windows would be through my backyard, which is far from any hiking trail. She replied condescendingly, "Well, sweetie, I'm sorry, but I have proof." She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture taken of me in my underwear through my window. It was blurry, but I knew it was mostly me because my hot tub, pool, and garden were in the picture's foreground. I pointed this out. The only way those things could be in the picture was if they had been taken from inside my backyard. I asked her directly if she and her kids had jumped my fence. Instead of giving me a direct answer, she lectured me about how inconsiderate it is to be an exhibitionist around children. I explained that I would never exhibit myself in a situation where I thought young children could see me, but I wasn't expecting anyone to trespass in my yard. She ignored the mention of trespassing and launched into a tirade about how she's sure I must be very proud of my body since I paid enough for it. I've had breast implants and some skin removal due to weight loss and a few tattoos to cover scars, but that's no excuse to expose myself to children. She ended her smug little tirade by saying, "So honey, you'll be closing your blinds from now on." I told her that I absolutely wouldn't because only people on my property could see in the windows, and she and her children were not welcome. She dropped a sweetness and started beaching that the previous owner of my home had been family friends and hadn't locked their gates, and why even have a butterfly garden if kids can't visit, and that it takes them half an hour to walk to the park unless they go through my yard, and that she'd seen kids at my place before, and why were only she and her children being excluded. At this point, I was pissed, so I told her that I locked my gates to keep souls like her out. She just kept harping on the fact that she'd seen other kids at my place, so I told her those are my nephews, who I love, whereas I don't give a single F whether you and your kids live or die. She started screaming, crying at me like she was possessed. I don't know if you guys remember that insane god warrior lady from Trading Spouses, but that is the caliber of yelling that this woman in my driveway was doing. I went inside, but she stayed out there for a few minutes, going on and on about being disrespected and how she was going to call the cops because I was a pedophile hoe making death threats toward her family. A few days afterward, the psycho returned along with a police officer. She had reported that I was exposing myself to her kids and making threats to her life. I told the officer my side of the story and showed him my backyard so he could see that the crazy lady's photo evidence could have only been taken while trespassing on my property. He had printouts of her evidence. I showed him the pictures they had to be taken inside my fence when I realized they were actually from several different occasions. I'm wearing different garments in some of them. I pointed this out again and pointed out that all of them had to be taken while trespassing. At this point, it seemed to click for the officer that the lady was a Karen, and he began questioning her about trespassing and taking pictures of me without my consent. He told us both that I could pursue charges if I wanted. At this point, she dialed the crazy up. She started babbling an insane stream of consciousness. It went on for at least a full 30 seconds of insane babble ranting while the cop just stared at her. When she stopped, the cop essentially said, "Well, okay, I'll look into that, but right now we're discussing the issue of trespassing and photographing this without consent." She ignored that and blurted out. She said she didn't care if my children died. The officer looked at me with a raised eyebrow, but told her that that was not a crime and attempted again to redirect to the issues of trespassing and photographing. Once again, she ignored that and asked the officer if he had any kids. He told her he didn't, and she kind of threw her hands up like, "Oh, well, that's the problem here." The officer assured her that the law doesn't change based on whether the responding officer has kids or not. The cop then asked me what I wanted to do. I said that I wanted to drop the whole thing on the condition that she deleted the pictures of me in her phone and never set foot on my property again. She didn't want to agree to either condition. Still, ultimately, the officer persuaded her to hand her phone over, and he went through her pictures and deleted them from all folders all the while. This beach acts like she's being violated. My second condition was more of a sticking point. This woman did not want to agree, never to set foot on my property. She kept diverting the discussion by saying crap like, "She has other kids over here all the time, so I don't see the issue," or "I just don't understand what the problem is." Eventually, the officer gave up and told her she'd officially been warned whether she wanted to accept that. She started weeping as if someone had slapped her and had to be escorted out of my yard. I thought that would be the end of it, but it's come to my attention that she's going around door to door in the neighborhood claiming that I'm a pedophilic prostitute and asking people to sign a petition to get me to move. Ultimately, the cost of legal fees to deal with this woman would have been insane, so we decided that before we went that route, we'd see if she could be deterred without a straight-up lawsuit. We contacted the police department again, and they had an officer go to the crazy woman's house and tell her she had to stop or she was going to be in deep crap. After that, things were pretty quiet until a few days before Thanksgiving, when I returned to find a person in my driveway. This time, though, it was a much more pleasant experience. It was the crazy mommy's adult son wanting to apologize to me for his mother's insanity and fill me in on what his family was doing about her. He was very nice and candid about answering all my questions. According to adult son, mommy has been taking her children on hikes that cut through my property for years. His mother had caught his younger brother looking at me through my window a few times when they walked through my yard and was extremely upset about it because she felt my presence was corrupting their mothers in time. Her son told me that he thinks the inciting incident for his mother's viral into insanity was when the teen son pointed me out to, as in front of mommy. He said she got really upset and cried in her room for the whole night and screamed at everyone who tried to talk to her. He thinks that's probably when she started sneaking into my yard and taking pictures of me. He claims the rest of the family had no idea she'd done this, that she was circulating a petition or spreading rumors about me until the police had shown up at their door to tell her that she had to stop her bad behavior. After the police came over, her family confronted her and she had a huge freakout. Apparently, she believed I was trying to seduce all the men in her family and threatened to end herself. The cops were called, and ultimately, she was committed. The son informed me that this wasn't the first time his mother had gone nuts, and that all of her freakouts had involved her paranoia about non-Jewish women who were even tangentially near the family. The neighborhood we moved into is a very Jewish place, and we might be the only non-Jewish people around. So perhaps that truly triggered her. So, as of now, she's at an institution. I exchanged contact info with adult son, and he will inform me about what's happening with her.